Our gospel reading for the morning comes from Mark chapter 1, beginning in verse 12. And the Spirit immediately drove Jesus out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. Now after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God and saying, "The time is fulfilled, and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. A week ago, Saturday morning, I was here at the church for a morning meeting. I was a little slow at getting going, so I didn't have time for breakfast beforehand. Not a problem, I thought. I would just come to the meeting, and then when the meeting was done, I would run down to McDonald's and then come back here and finish up some work. Seemed fine. Well, the meeting here ran a little longer than I thought. Still not a problem. I got in my car, I drove down to McDonald's. I stepped inside, and the line was 5 or 6 people deep, one person at the counter taking orders. So I started to feel this kind of impatience rise. You know how that goes? And then I remembered this sermon series. God does that to me sometimes. Waiting. And so I took a deep breath. I took a step back from the impatience. I took a step back from that self-centered, I just want to place my order thing. And I just relaxed into the situation. It took probably about 10 minutes for me to move to the front of the line, to the counter, to give my order. And as I was about ready to place my order, first one in line, looking eye to eye with the person at the counter, the breakfast menu on the flat screens in there changed. It was 11 a.m. and McDonald's was no longer serving breakfast. So I ask if, because I was in line, I might still order from the breakfast menu. Seemed to make sense. No, I was told they don't let us do that, except you can order one of the 4 or 5 breakfast sandwiches that they serve all day. And so as she said that, you know how it goes, I was pondering this protest about the injustice of the system. And the fact that I had missed this breakfast cutoff because I was patiently waiting in line. But then the more patient self whispered in my ear, you know, she's just doing her job and she doesn't need any attitude from me. So I decided, yep, and I just let it go and I ordered from the lunch menu. A small thing. I needed to check the air pressure in my tires this week. I'd had them rotated and I wanted to make sure that they had put the pressure that I had requested in them. And I was out running errands before an appointment. Time was tight. You know how you try to just slip in something while you're out and about. I was out running these errands and I thought, hey, I'm just going to slip into the get-go in the Hermitage Giant Eagle. Rarely are there people there. I'm going to slip in there and I'm going to check my tire pressure. But as I pulled in, you know what happened. Somebody pulled right in ahead of me. And again, I feel this sort of impatience thing start to rise. And again, I remembered this sermon series, Waiting. So I just parked in line, waited a few minutes while this guy filled up all 4 of his tires. When he was done, I pulled in to check my tires. All was fine. Waiting. It's a small thing. This past Tuesday morning, I was at the bank, and I was planning to do a quick stop. I had a simple transaction, and you probably know where this is going by now, don't you? There were 2 tellers working the window. The waiting line was long, and the waiting line was long because it so happened the 2 people working with the tellers had some sort of complicated transactions. You know how that goes. Not 1, but 2. Both tellers were occupied Neither were moving. Nothing seemed to be happening. And so we waited. And we waited, and I thought of coming back, and I thought, well, maybe I could just get in my car and drive out through the drive-thru, right? But maybe there's waiting out there too. I don't know. And then I remembered this sermon series, Waiting. This was a chance to practice a little waiting, exercise that waiting muscle, right? And so I did. I let the impatience and frustration go, and before long, a third teller opened a window. Things went quickly. I was out of the bank soon, a small thing. Now, waiting can be about big things, but often in the course of a real day in a real life, it's about small things. And those small things give us opportunity to practice waiting, practice patience, practice a type of grace and peace for the big things in life when they do come. And I recognize that the sermon series on waiting has also created an awareness, a paying attention and working it out in real life, working it out in my real life. You know, you practice what you preach, right? I've been given opportunity to do that. And I've had a couple people tell me the same thing. Unexpected things come up in their lives, small things. And rather than responding with frustration and impatience, it went well. Waiting. A type of holy waiting. Small frustrations in life come every day and give opportunity to practice holy waiting. But what about those big things? What about those big things? Jim lost his job. He's 35. He knew his career was really going nowhere, but you know what he liked? He liked the comfort, and he liked a sense of control. Married with a 7-year-old, he liked the dependable paychecks that came. Now, if he's honest, he would tell you he's terrified. And it feels like he's in this strange land. Everything seems swept away. The shape of his day, the shape of his work week, or his unwork week, the shape of his budget, his friendships, his identity, his confidence. It all feels like sand somehow slipping through his fingers. He's in an anxious wilderness now, struggling to wait. And there's Joan. She's finishing her first round of chemo treatments. She's tired and weak. Her tasting is off. Her fingertips are numb, and she struggles to concentrate. She feels out of touch with just the normal pleasures of life. She's living this strange life called chemo. Hardest of all, she doesn't know what lies ahead. Has the treatment worked? She's waiting. She feels so out of control she can't fix anything, so now all she can do is wait, waiting for the test results and her doctor, waiting for her confidence to come back, waiting for the next plans to be made, waiting for her energy to return. There are so many uncertainties, so many fears. It's a wilderness of waiting. And there's Mary. She's in a terrible marriage. And Phil's in an exhausting job. Joyce is sick with worry about losing her daughter to a drug addiction. Tony watches his mother lose ground to dementia a little each day. Fran grieves the death of an adult child. Bill is sick with this grinding loneliness. Each is in her own or his own wilderness. You see, in the wilderness, you have no power, no control, no knowledge of moving things along. In the wilderness, you can't make things right. All you can do is wait. The wilderness is that time in our lives when something has gone deeply wrong and all we can do now is wait. It's a stillness, it's a strange land where there is little life and dry winds blow away what's familiar. Days are scrubby and hostile with little comfort and control. It's a place of silence and fears. It's a place where we are confronted with the dark contours of our personalities. And yet, strangely, these deep wildernesses are places of holiness and salvation and healing. The Bible is filled with stories of deserts, wastelands, wilderness. They are places of disorientation and commitment. They are places of struggle and salvation. They are places of loss and growth and hope. Moses, Elijah, the nation of Israel, John the Baptist, Jesus, they all come from the wilderness. Stripped of distractions and excuses, the solitary soul comes to know himself or herself and the mercy of God. All those wildernesses of life are times and places of surrender. In a wilderness, we give up the illusions and control of comfort, don't we? Deuteronomy 8 that Lisa read for us summarizes the nation Israel's experience in the wilderness. It's 40 years. A generation comes and a generation goes. In the wilderness, they learn about hunger and enough. They learn to trust God. They learn that bread is not enough, but they also need a relationship with God. There they learn about loving God, and they learn about caring for each other, and that it matters. In the wilderness, they learn that they need to trust God. It's a lesson that they will need to remember and practice again and again when they come into the days where living is easy. And we know this same thing ourselves, don't we? How often when times are hard do our spiritual lives seem to come alive with prayer and these conversations with God and worship? It all seems more urgent, doesn't it? And then when things go back to normal, we start to doze in the Spirit. It's like eating a bowl of strawberries every morning for a week, and then you go on a fast, and you break that fast with one strawberry, and there's more joy in the taste of that one strawberry than in the bowls of strawberries we have been eating each day. You see, the wilderness wakes us up. And very honestly, that's the secret to a spiritual life. We let go of the illusions of control, and we have an everyday conversation with God. The wilderness, those times of deep loss, when all we can do is wait, is also a time and a place of struggle. In the silence and the solitude of the wilderness, we are away from all of our distractions and busyness. In the wilderness, we face all those parts of ourselves that we push away and we hide. Our fears, our pride, our addictions, our despair, our hurts, our pettiness, our bitterness, our greed, our anger. Can we face those whispers, those dark places, and know salvation? You see, the wilderness is that place. Mark 1 tells of Jesus' struggle in the wilderness. He's there 40 days. And what he's doing is he's sorting out this call from God. He's sorting it out, and he struggles in their temptations. Will he use his power and his call for his own needs? That's pride. Will he amaze people with the miraculous and get these big crowds to follow him? Will he compromise the way so it's easier for him and easier for others? It's a fear of failure. In the silence, Jesus hears the whispers. In the shadows, he sees the darkness. But the wilderness is not just a place of temptations and Satan and wild beasts. It's also a place of angels and God and salvation. 40 days. Jesus leaves the wilderness clear about who he is and the way of God. And the wilderness is also, it's a place of salvation. It may seem dry and barren without life or hope, but God is there. Isaiah 35, as I said, is a salvation oracle. It's a song of God's salvation breaking out in surprising places. Did you catch that? Dry land shall see water and flower and beauty. People who believe they were forgotten shall know healing and salvation and hope. No wilderness, cancer, divorce, abuse, grief, death is beyond the salvation of God. There is mercy in the wilderness. God is there too. Waiting. It's more than an annoying part of life that we often try to avoid. Rather, it gives us opportunity. Waiting gives us opportunity to slow down. It gives us opportunity to take ourselves a little less seriously. And it gives us opportunity to look for God and God's grace all around us, like the story I read to the kids. What did Joe see? What do we see when we slow down and open our eyes? Waiting, you see, is a part of real human life. Often it comes in small ways every day, and sometimes it comes as a wilderness, a season in life. More than 20 years ago, I led a divorce recovery group. I was a pastor down in Elwood City. We had a couple of folks from my church and 5 or 6 folks from the community in this divorce recovery group. We met one evening a week for 8 weeks. As we gathered, people would share about their lives, share about their families, and they shared about their divorces. We read and discussed a book on recovering after divorce, as you can move through all of that in healthier ways. And as we shared, it became obvious that some folks were stuck in anger, others burdened with guilt, and some found a way to move forward. The group quickly became a fellowship group of support. It was a time of wilderness for everyone. One of the principles of divorce recovery is to honestly look at the failed marriage and take some responsibility for why it failed. It's helpful to do that because then you can learn about what to change about yourself, how to grow. And it's helpful to do that because it's empowering. It's empowering because I'm not just a helpless victim, but I can change things. I can change something in myself to make it better and different. So as we're talking about this, I could tell one woman was struggling with this idea of responsibility. From her story, we knew that she was coming out of a physically and emotionally abusive marriage. So she asked if taking responsibility meant that the abuse that she suffered was her fault. Something that her husband had told her over and over again. I hit you because you make me mad. It's your fault. And I told her absolutely not. Any and all abuse is the fault of the abuser. It's not her responsibility. But then I said, maybe take a step back from this everything and wonder for just a minute about how you got there and how you chose your ex-husband. I could tell she was thinking. During the divorce recovery meeting the next week, this woman shared that it had been difficult. But she had looked at herself. She had looked at why she got married, and she had looked at why she chose who she did. And she shared then that she had a history of being abused, and she thought that's what she deserved. She shared that she thought that's just how relationships worked, because that had been a part of all of her relationships. And she shared that she was lonely and she was afraid of being alone, so she had just settled. We all listened attentively and caringly. And we knew somehow that something important was happening right then. She looked around and she shared that it was hard. She had avoided all that before, but now she felt and she believed that things could be different, starting with herself. And after the meeting, I then gave her the names of a couple counselors to help her with the good work that she had started. It was a wilderness that she was in. And she had been in it for a long time, waiting. And there she dared to surrender. She dared to struggle. She dared to look at herself and listen to the whispers and look at the shadows. And there in the wilderness, she experienced the salvation of God that brought healing and hope to her life. Some waiting is about small things every day, isn't it? And some waiting is about a wilderness. And indeed, it comes to us all. No one is immune. And in the waiting, we can come to know ourselves. We can come to know God and know God's salvation in ways we would not know otherwise. There is mercy in the wilderness. Amen.